Today we're gonna cover what can you do with social media from a strategic perspective. Well, let's start with the basics, and let me tell you overall what our perspective is gonna be. Perspective is gonna be that social media is a tool that you can use for different functions, but a very powerful tool indeed. Now, for us to decide how can social media be used strategically, first we need to understand what a strategy is. In particular, what is marketing strategy? It's basically going to be a process by which we actually plan and hopefully execute how to create value for customers so that we can actually engage into an exchange with them, exchange of value, right? That it's going to enable us, hopefully in the long term, to maintain that relationship profitable both for the customer and the organization, so that we can basically satisfy our corporate objectives, essentially. Okay. Now, how is social media going to help us with this? Well, it can accomplish different things for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list some of the maybe bigger things that we can actually do with social media strategically, but this is not an all-encompassing list. There are other things that you can do, but I would say these are probably the most prominent and important ones. So what kind of challenges can we tackle? What kind of opportunities can we address with social media? Well, not necessarily in order of importance. We have communication and outreach, community management, support and customer service. We're going to be able to also do some PR and reputation management. We're going to be able to advertise. We're going to be able to close in sales, and if not close in sales in some cases, at least provide some leads so that we can actually do that maybe through other media or other channels. It's going to help us also with our search engine optimization. And finally, we might also be able to do some market research so that we can understand better our customers and the marketplace. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these a little bit more carefully and give you a little flavor on how you will go about doing this in general. So let's start with communication. At the end of the day, social media, it's a communication channel, right? But it's a communication channel that has specific characteristics that make it particularly powerful. And these characteristics are, among others, that it's a two-way communication street, right? Not only we get to blast our message, which we might be able to do maybe through some of our platforms or channels, but it's going to be a two-way communication. The customer is going to have a voice as well, and it's important that we actually address that and leverage it, honestly. Okay. Also, it's in real time, or at least potentially, although some platforms are better at this than others. Probably the quintessential platform online for real-time information is Twitter, but there are others that enable you to share information quickly and timely with your customers. And also the pool of customers that you're going to be able to reach is global, right? So because of this, you should strongly consider using your social media platforms to share information with your actual customers and potential customers. Now, what kind of information should you share? Well, I mean, this is obviously up to you and up to what your customer is interested in, but typical information that you will be sharing will be updates about your products and brands, any news that are relevant either to you or the industry that you are actually operating in, and maybe special announcements if there are events, etc. Right? And not only you want to do this, but you want to do this in a way that it enables your customers or your followers or both to interact with you, not only to receive the messages, but actually to ask questions and address them. We'll talk about customer support in a couple of slides, and also let them give you feedback about whether the content that you're sharing is actually of interest to them, and also give them the opportunity to be an advocate for your brand, right? So they can share whatever content you're actually generating online. Good. Now, on top of sharing information, it is a more long-term approach to try to generate or create a community around your brand, right? Or around your company. Now, if you have a large corporation that has multiple brands, it's probably wise that you create a community around each of the brands instead of just the corporation, right? So how do you go about doing this? Well, a couple of things that you're probably want to be addressing if this is one of your goals. One is long term. This is not something that happens overnight. Okay, so come up with a long-term strategy. What are you going to do a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now to do this? That's the first part. The second thing is you're going to have somebody in charge of this community, right? And the prominent position here is going to be the community manager, right? Which is going to be a person that is in charge of interactions with customers and also all the efforts to build this community overall, right? And now to do so, what you're going to have to do, few steps. First, start by defining your community. I already suggested, for example, to use the brand as the center, but you need to understand who your potentially community members are. So you need to know about your customers and what the audience really is about and what are they interested in. Second, try to develop this community in the platform that is actually relevant to these community members. So basically pick your social media platforms wisely based on the customer preferences. And third, establish some community guidelines. What are the rules of engagement with your customers? What are the things that are okay and not okay within the community? And this is something that if you are upfront with your customers, it will usually facilitate dramatically the generation of the community and hopefully not having the community turn toxic, which is something that unfortunately happens sometimes online. Next, whenever you are engaging with these community members, make sure that you are authentic, that you really live up to the brand values that you're trying to achieve, right? Don't hide the problems and pretend like people are not going to learn about them. We'll discuss customer support later, but if there is a problem, you're better off acknowledging that the problem actually exists and trying to positively, but clearly solve the problem. What are you going to do to improve? Right? Next, acknowledge that in the community it's not just all about the brand, and that the customers and community members can contribute to the brand as well. So as much as you can, encourage your community members to generate content around the brand. And you can leverage this in many ways, but essentially crowdsource, right? And then to the people that actually put in the effort to create that content, especially if it's high quality content, show appreciation and recognition. You can just create simple badges online or some sort of unique visuals that identify the community members that have significantly contributed to the community well-being and moving forward. Okay. Now, not only you can build a community, but you could also provide customer support for those maybe loyal customers or actual customers that have bought your products or services. And the nice thing about having this channel of communication is that it's going to enable you to basically react to potential negative experiences. And there are always going to be some, right? So whether you choose to do this or not, there are some platforms that are particularly amenable to this. Twitter is one, right? So you'll have to make a decision. Are you going to provide customer support online? These days, a lot of brands do this. And if you do that, if you decide that this is going to be something that you want to actively pursue, then you're going to have to follow a few steps. And I think these are mostly common sense, but I want to make sure that we cover them. The first thing is you need to have dedicated people that are monitoring those social platforms through which you're trying to offer customer support, right? And of course, the larger the company it is, the more people you're going to have dedicated to this, right? Second, most platforms, Twitter, for example, or Facebook, have requirements as to how quickly you should react or respond to customer complaints. Okay, typically 24 hours, right? So make sure that you're staffed sufficiently so that you can make sure that you don't keep customers waiting too long, essentially. Okay. Second, it's not seen as okay to just have a cookie cutter response to all customers. It's okay to have, let's say, dynamic templates, right? Because a lot of the issues that you're going to be facing are going to have similarities, right? But adding some customization to the template to acknowledge and to showcase that you're actually reading the messages carefully and trying to provide a customized solution. And it's often, if not always, seen as an important aspect. Okay. Sometimes, because things can get quite negative and or quite unique, you might have to take the conversation private. Okay. And you need to train your customer service representatives in when this should actually be done. Okay, so training is very important, like any other customer-facing interactions. Okay. Also, in general, it's very important that part of this training is make sure that the tone of the messages is always very positive and professional, right? Conversations can become toxic quickly. Remember that unfortunately, the people that you're going to interact with are the ones that usually have a very negative experience. Otherwise, they will not be basically incentivized in their own mind to go ahead and complain about it, right, actively. So because of that, make sure that the people that are providing the answers are well trained in this and they have maybe the right temperament. Not everybody is well suited to be a customer service representative. And finally, and this is, in my opinion, the most important aspect and something that is not always emphasized, if you keep getting the same complaint over and over from multiple customers, it means that there is something that you need to fix or change, either in your product, in your service, or any other processes that you have in place. So instead of taking this as an opportunity to provide customer support and fix, an idiosyncrasy, actually take it as a potential flaw in your brand and see how you can improve it. So take this as an opportunity to get better, essentially. On top of providing customer support, sometimes there are going to be negative interactions that might actually go viral. What do I mean by this? Well, we've already talked about how people process negative information or anything that it's negative towards them as being more important or affecting their decision making more. That's what prospect theory says, right? So there is a good chance, because of this effect and many others, that a negative story or a complaint from a customer can go viral, right? If you are in this situation, you're going to have crisis management support. You're going to need some sort of strategy that is going to enable you to deal with that negative information. Now, sometimes this negative information, if you do the right things, it doesn't go viral, although it might be beyond your control sometimes. But definitely the way you react to that negative information, it's going to go a long way in making sure that it doesn't go viral, right? So what should you do? First, you should have a social media policy that it's going to tell your employees, what are the rules regarding what they post online and what they are not allowed to post online. And you need to realize that oftentimes a worker might not be aware that them posting a response in a social media environment might be representing the brand indirectly. So you should set clear standards as to what's acceptable and what's not, who is allowed to post what, and in what social media platform. Okay, starting that. Second, In general, you should be scanning the social media platforms, both the ones, especially the ones where you are active, but even the ones that you're not so active, to see what kind of messages are bubbling up, right? And so you need some sort of monitoring or scanning software that is going to tell you about your brand mentions and if there are potential negative issues that are arising. Okay, that's one. Two, if you actually find a negative message about your brand or a complaint, in general, it's good practice to address it as soon as possible. Now, this might mean taking it private if it's a very specific message, and you do so by requesting that the person that is voicing their concern or negative story contact you through some sort of private channel. So you might provide an email address, for example. Right? Okay. But in all cases, okay, be very transparent about what you're going to be doing about it. Okay, if there is a problem, pretending like the problem is not there and trying to bury the problem usually backfires on you. Okay, so if there is a problem with something regarding the brand and you try to pretend like the problem is not there, remember, you cannot control the conversation. People are going to still talk about it. And usually this has a very negative effect. So you're better off addressing it. And you're better off addressing it quickly. And you're better off provide a solution to the problem. Otherwise, it can easily get out of hand. If you got an example about how out of hand things can get, you can ask Bud Light how things are going in the last few months. Okay. And if the information that is making the rounds online is false, you should explain why it is false. And if it is not false, you should provide a solution. Okay, what is going to be your stance going forward, given the fact that people have found an issue with your product, with your strategy, with your communication or messaging, whatever it is. Okay, don't just bury your head in the sand and hope that it's going to go away. It may not. And if it doesn't, you will be sorry you didn't address it. Now, on a maybe more positive note, you can use social media platforms, obviously, for advertising and for generating more awareness about your brand. This is something that we've been already talking about when we're talking about the different social media platforms. Now, how do you go about this? Well, it's going to vary somewhat from platform to platform, but broadly speaking, the first thing that you need to do in all advertising use is start with your audience, right? You need to have a very clear idea about who your target audience is. By now, you should know the kind of tools you can do to achieve this. One is you can use segmentation, but if for whatever reason that's not available, I will strongly suggest you do persona analysis or maps in this case. Okay, so who is your target audience first? Based on that, pick the platforms where they usually consume content and where they usually communicate with companies and brands and other users, right? Good. So, okay, fish where the fish are. We've already said this. Good. What else? Then create an ad that is compelling to them. Of course, this is going to be brand specific and customer specific. You should start from the customer. Okay, make something that has compelling value for them and then communicate it in a way that it's interesting, that it's novel, that it's unique, right? You need somebody who is creative here. Okay, that means maybe look outside of your marketing department. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's true. Okay. Next, a unique feature, or somewhat unique, of social media is this idea of influencers, right? And you might do some influencer analysis. Who is a good influencer for the target segment that you have chosen? Not all influencers are created equal in the sense that they have very unique audiences. So pick one that actually matches your brand, your audience, and ideally they already have a relationship with the customers that you're trying to tap into. Next, if you have multiple ad copies or multiple ads, and that's always a good idea, by the way, they should be thematically related, but maybe the implementation and the variations are there so that we can avoid maybe boring our audience, right? You might want to A/B test those ads, meaning run them, let's say in tandem, and see which one has better results. Okay, we'll talk much more in detail about A/B testing when we talk about measurement, analytics, and testing. Okay, which I think is chapter 20, but I don't remember. We'll get there. Okay, and then finally, keep tab on what kind of effects do you get from this. Now, if you're doing direct advertising for a product, you might want to be looking at things like click-through rates. You might want to be looking at things like closed sales. But you might also want to look at some more indirect metrics, like number of mentions of the brand, right? And what kind of mentions are there? You might want to do some sentiment analysis, meaning, are people talking positive things about your brand? Because you might see an increase in talk about your brand or chatter, right? But the question is it mostly positive, right? Or is it mostly negative? And that old adagio that negative publicity is better than no publicity, I'm not sure that's technically true, right? I think this is more of an excuse than anything else. But if you don't track it, you don't know what's happening. And finally, when it comes down to results, you might want to also close sales and or generate leads so that you can maybe engage those leads using different channels, right? How do you do that? Well, you're going to do this differently in different channels. Obviously, for some channels like business-to-business channels, there is going to be some social media platforms that are particularly well suited. In this case, it will be LinkedIn, unsurprisingly. If it's business-to-consumer, all platforms that we have discussed are potentially interesting, but again, follow the same guidelines that we have given multiple times by now, which is always try to take those platforms that are best suited for the audience that you're trying to reach. So look at your persona analysis again, okay? And where do they spend most of their time, right? Good. Now, if you decide, for example, to generate leads, how can you do that? Well, you might want to create this thing called a lead magnet. Okay? Here you have an example of a lead magnet, okay? And now, what this is doing is it's trying to provide something to the customer in exchange for their contact information or details, right? So in this case, I'm trying to get a phone number or an email, right? In this case, the email is required, but the phone number would be nice to have, let's say, right? So what you're trying to do here is I'll give you something, in this case, a digital asset, which is an ebook, in exchange for your contact information. Now, depending on who these people are and what they are interested in, this might be particularly useful for you, right? So you need to create a lead magnet that is specific to your brand and the purpose of this lead generation campaign. Okay. Now, what else can help with this? Provide some testimonials online about why you are a thought leader in a particular area, right? Why should they trust your brand, right? If you do this, people are going to be more willing to interact with you, and because of that, they might be more willing to give you their information, and finally, maybe down a long sales cycle, or they might actually end up engaging with you as a customer, right? You might have to create special offers like I just shown you, and then after you create the special offer, you might have to reconvey or recontact these people so that you can actually finally get them down the sales funnel. And then the last aspect that I'm going to discuss when it comes down to social media, even though technically there are more things that you can do with social media other than the ones that I'm going to discuss today. You can actually use social media to help you with your SEO, right? With your search engine optimization. Now, how can you do this? Well, you can do this because at the end of the day, all your social media channels and interactions with customers are essentially digital assets that are part of the internet. And all search engines are going to crawl through those as well. And those are going to help you or hinder you if you don't do a good job in increasing your rank within search engines, especially the rank for your brand. Right? So assuming that one of the keywords that you're going to be interested, it's going to be your brand name or brand names if you have multiple. All your social media platform profiles and interactions are going to be basically brand assets that you can leverage to increase the chances that, for example, your website or your social media profiles will showcase high up within the search engine results. Now, how do you do this? Well, you're going to have to optimize your social media interactions as well. How do you do this? Well, again, each platform is going to be a little bit different, but if you're trying to talk about broad strokes on how you improve your SEO with social media, the first thing where you need to spend quite a bit of time, I'm assuming this is common sense, but again, is in your social media profile. Okay, so those profiles need to be built again around keywords that you have chosen for your SEO. That doesn't mean it's repeating the keywords and that's it. That's not useful, as you know by now. But thematically, you need to sprinkle these keywords through your profile and or variations of thereof, synonyms and other words that are related to the keywords of interest. Okay. What else should you do? You should make the life easy of anybody that is one of your followers or social media platform interactions to share your content. Have prominent buttons that enable people to share whatever it is that you're doing via the social media platforms. If you decrease the effort necessary for an action, that action will happen at a higher rate. This is always true, right? So because of that, make it easy on them. If it's easy, they'll be more likely to do it. If they do more of it, your rankings will go up because your brand will be mentioned more times, etc., etc., etc. What else? Again, keyword management is essential, right? So whenever you're posting content via platforms, you should do so using content that is built around keywords, like I think we have emphasized quite a bit of time, especially when it comes down to picking things like hashtags that are used by social media platforms to organize or search for content relevant to potential audiences and or customers. And you should apply this not only to text, but also to other digital assets like pictures and videos. So remember, file names should have keywords, captions should have keywords or variations of keywords, etc., etc., etc. That's what I have for this one.